no experience is the same. You really have to lean on experience and then your thoughts about those experiences. That's something that we can't just mind read. And so the founder really has to kind of dig deep and figure out what is it about my life that I can be willing to talk about or want to talk about.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. This show is your digital partner for filtering the trends and focusing on the content that matters most, creating connection that drives results. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together. Imelda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Just to maybe tee up so we kind of know your background and your insights, like kind of where they're coming from. Can you just share a little bit like where you work, what you do? What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so I work for a content agency called Compound Content Studio, a place I just joined. So still kind of getting that wrapped around in my head. I work as a content editor, and what we do is essentially look at writing B2B founder-led content. So mainly on LinkedIn, sometimes on X, but essentially get that, founder-led voice and let their story shine.
Yeah. We talk a lot about founder-led content on this show. So it's very popular. So I'm sure we'll dive into it. But let's maybe start with your story. So what led you into content? How did you get back into the agency world? Maybe just kind of share a little path for us.
Yeah, so funny enough, I didn't start out in content. My professional career, should we call it that, started as an English instructor for university and community college. It's funny because when I was in grad school, I was doing, basically a mentor or a teaching assistantship, right? Where I was teaching comp courses, business English courses, and I was doing that while pursuing my degree. And I had the thought of, well, let me keep this going. Maybe I want to go on and get a PhD. Wasn't really so sure as I was kind of figuring it all out. So I got my bachelor's in English and then I got my master's in English literature. So,
wow.
Yeah. So just going from, I wanted to be really an academic and pursue more of that kind of idea with stories because storytelling has been my life. I love telling and consuming stories, and English just seemed the right route for me, especially with literary analysis and creative writing. So as I was pursuing my master's, I just kind of transitioned naturally into basically teaching the same courses that I was teaching while I was getting my master's degree for the same university I was taking classes from.
That's
awesome.
So
it was just a natural transition as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so did that for essentially a good 6 or so years. And the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And everyone was moving online. I was teaching online. And then I'm like, I kind of want to do something else. Yeah. What else can I do? And I was talking about content. I was talking about narrative frameworks and stories and setting up things for, making it work in the market. So there's so many things that I was doing. I thought maybe I should go into content. So I essentially started working for this small online business that was basically a fitness business, a lifestyle business. And I was doing everything from paid ads to coaching calls. So it was very much a hodgepodge thing. And then I officially transitioned into content marketing in 2021. So I was doing a little bit of content marketing in 2020, but officially in 2021, I worked for an agency. And then I was kind of able to figure out kind of the fast moving parts of everything as a copywriter and a content manager. And then officially was like, all right, let's kind of have something that's more full-time, and was able to do content for a health and wellness company. And so officially was a content marketing manager there. And I was starting to really work on blogs and starting to get a sense of writing for not only customers, but also writing for the healthcare practitioners. So I was finally kind of getting a sense of B2B, B2C, all of that. And then went a whole different route with my next content marketing gig with IT training.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So it's funny to go from an agency life, which actually was a beauty brand business, and then healthcare and then IT, and now focusing solely on B2B founder-led content. It's such a fascinating thing to look back on, because if you would have told me back in 2016 that I'd be writing for founders and editing content and managing all of that, I would have been like, no. No, why would I be doing that?
But here you are. Yeah, it's funny. At this point, I've been at Composely for over 3 years, so, you know, it's fine. But I'm very similar. I always said I never wanted to work remotely. I never wanted to work for an agency. And here we are 3 years later, you know, and it's great. But, you know, it's always the things you think you don't want to do.
Yeah, we really don't know what we want. We're given what we're meant to have.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We're given what we're meant to have. That's great.
We go with it. I always say to what is meant for you will be there. What is not meant for you will pass you by. Mm-hmm. And when I was kind of figuring out where I was going with my life and my professional job opportunities, that was something I really had to kind of sit with. Because it's so easy to be like, why isn't this happening? But really, it's leading you to where you need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. What are 2 or 3 things that you think really set good founder-led content apart?
I think one is your authentic experience. I know authenticity is a word that's been overused, and it's like love, right? Oh, I love this. Do you really love it?
Yeah.
Probably not. But I think no experience is the same. So you really have to lean on experience and then your thoughts about those experiences. Because everyone's going to have thoughts about your experiences. You have to have your own thoughts about your own experience. And that's something that we can't just mind read. And so the founder really has to kind of dig deep and figure out, what is it about my life that I can be willing to talk about or want to talk about? Mm-hmm. And I think that has made the difference with really good content, because you can really just glean those details that maybe no one else could realize. And of course, AI won't realize, because that's something that's very ingrained in the person versus something that could be just found anywhere. So very much so, like, lean on your experiences and your thoughts about those experiences. And also not being afraid to take a stand. It doesn't have to be anything that's too crazy, but essentially, once you commit to what you're saying, stick with it. And then on the flip side, if your ideas change or if your opinions change, then be willing to be open about that too and be vulnerable about that. So I think the third thing is, don't be afraid to have your quirky sense of humor or side come out, because that's what's going to draw the first attention, is your wit, or you're like, oh, what's going to happen here today? Oh, well, then it's going to be this. And it's just funny, because when I talk to founders and there's like sense of humor comes through, I'm always like, can I use that? Because that's just so good. And no one can really replicate that either. So yeah, basically experiences and your thoughts and experiences, you know, taking a stance and not being afraid to do so. And then let your quirky self shine. It's fun that way.
I agree. I mean, that quirkiness, that authenticity comes through. And you mentioned when you see that, you're like, okay, I want to use that. But I think that's what often gets missed, is when either founders aren't great at, like, they're leading businesses, you know, they're not always the social media experts or the webinar or speaking experts, but they have a lot to say, a lot of value to give. I think everyone's trying to figure out how to create like a repeatable motion, how to do this at scale. Like, what has worked for you coming in as not just someone else at the company trying to do this, but actually a third party? Like, what's the operational workflow that you've seen work?
Well, it definitely comes down to that content interview call. I think you can really just have a conversation. So the person themselves may not realize that they had that funny idea, or that it's a hot take, or it's something that people actually want to listen to, because they're heads down in what they're doing. not everyone can be a founder. It takes a special type of individual to do what they do. It
Certainly does.
It's absolutely amazing. I'm sitting there, kind of taking it all in going, how do you do that? And so I'm inspired by them. You just have to, ask the right questions, or at least kind of really dig deep in showing that that's really cool. Let's talk about it. And also acknowledge that not everyone can do what you do. Go ahead and say something that you like. And it's okay if it's all over the place. I always tell, founders that I talk to, the more you give me, the more I can work with. It could be a hodgepodge of something, but we're going to find a way to streamline together. That's my job, right? That's the job that we're doing to make sure that you sound most like you. So I think once they kind of get a sense of, oh, it's just a conversation and it's just showing that this is not what everyone does. And people who will never do what a founder does is still interested in seeing how they think, because there are people that are trying to change the world at the end of the day. And in their own little corners, they're all trying to make the world a better place than what it is right now.
How do you capture a founder's voice? Is that part of what you do well? I really am a chameleon in my writing style and matching, or are you almost creating the voice for a founder that's maybe not great at that to start with?
Yeah, well, those are good points to think about, because usually I get a sense of their voice by talking with them and their cadence. And I like to say that I embody whatever they're trying to say. And if it's not clear, then I'll take in kind of that idea of, what if this was a character in like a screenplay that I'm writing? And so how would you embody that character? Maybe I take this a little bit too.
No, this is great.
I like to think that they're characters they're real people, obviously, but I like to think that they're someone who has a backstory that maybe I might not know too much of, but like, what is it that they're thinking of? So I try to kind of step into their shoes in that sense. And either they have a tone that I can kind of follow from content they've written before, idea that they mentioned before, or I'll kind of let it start to flow. I know that's not very tactical.
Precise, yeah.
But then I continue to like work at it and work at it and work at it, and then discover, all right, this is kind of what we're going for. Then of course, talking to that founder again, is this what you're going for? And if it's on the money, great. If it's not, well, then let's
readjust,
redo it. Exactly. But I like to kind of think from their perspective. There's some psychology behind this of what could have been going on in their minds, even if they didn't say anything in that moment. What's the feeling? Because they're human at the end of the day. What is it about their human experience that I can relate to as best as I can from my human experience, and then kind of see where the road goes from there. It's a journey for me too. So I'm wholly invested in these individuals because, again, their stories are what make themselves so like such unique and captivating people to kind of follow. So I learned a lot, and I feel like I've been able to educate myself on things that I never thought I'd educate myself with, and AI is helpful with that, kind of giving the TLDR on, okay, if I, was this type of person, what would I need to know? Where before I was Googling and Googling and Googling, I'm able to kind of like, can you just give me a rundown? Then of course I'll go in and do some more research, but just getting that sense. So yeah, embodying who they are and kind of in essence, because they're human at the end of the day, living a human experience, but they're doing something that I will never do, but I can get a sense of like, all right, we can try to capture this.
Yeah, I was going to ask how AI has maybe helped or hurt in this, and the research is a really interesting point. But have you used it for tone, or if, maybe someone does a webinar to redo it, or even saying like, can you read this? Does this sound like this person? Where have you found it to help? Where have you found it to hurt?
Yeah. Oh, when it's like any recorded content, I'll always put transcripts and just to kind of get a sense of like, these are their words that they talked about, and to kind of follow whatever that cadence is, just to be aware of, what they said or what they didn't. I think what has helped is just kind of organizing and kind of putting into a folder like, all right, this is what they've said. Let's keep like a running tab on that. Where it's hurt is when it starts to make up things that didn't happen. It wasn't what I was trying to go for. And then to recalibrate, because I've noticed that people change their mind. So even if they might have said something in a content interview or even in a webinar, and then you put something out there, and then they said, no, I don't like that. So to be aware that the nuances can make that difference, and to kind of, as best as you can, protect that.
I will say, as a leader who sometimes is like, but you said this was okay like 2 days ago. And I was like, I know, but now that I see it, like, it's different.
Right.
We're bad at that, but it is real.
Right. And I think that open communication is also important when talking to someone who you're trying to kind of, put content for. I've learned to just keep that open communication and just know that I also changed my mind. So it is a thing. And to also make note of like, well, they actually wanted this, and you can kind of push the levers a little bit one way and then the other way, and you start to gauge a little bit more. So it's never a done process. You just have to know when to stop. And that's something that I have learned throughout my writing career is just, okay, I think this is a good moment to stop, and we'll go from there. And I think that's what founders need to realize too. Like, at some point, you're going to have to just kind of take a pause and be like, this is fine. Let's get it out there. We can always adjust on the next time. There's always another opportunity to clarify your voice even more.
As a sales and marketing leader, I'm always interested to hear about a team's tech stack. At Composely, we use Apollo with HubSpot to fuel our outbound outreach. My team loves it. It consistently provides accurate contact information and is incredibly user-friendly. If you're thinking about changing your data provider or just want to hear more about our experience, connect with me on LinkedIn or check out the link in the show notes of this episode. Improve your inbound, increase conversion, and keep your marketing database squeaky clean with Apollo. So what do you think are some of the things to avoid, or like the biggest faults of people who are trying to get into founder-led content?
I guess the faults going into founder-led content is assuming that you know what founder-led content is. Even if you've been writing for how many years, it's a whole different approach because you have to take yourself out of it. Now, there's going to be lingering instances of you. I think that just always happens. But to know that, all right, this is something that needs to be done, especially for on LinkedIn, in a concise way, in a packaged, I like to think of it as like a packaged folder. And you have to craft it in a way that's not going to take up someone's time, but also allows that person to spend the time on. But the fact is, what you know about storytelling, what you know about creating content and writing, the ideas are the same, the frameworks are the same, like having that strong hook, having that kind of characterization and plot point, and then like a satisfying conclusion to close the loop. It's going to be very different unless you start doing it. So in going into it, I say, no, you have to practice that kind of focus and the way that maybe founders talk, and understand that it's going to be very different to how you talk. Or maybe the same, just depends. Mm-hmm. And to train, it's a new type of training. It's a retraining. And that's something that I got a glimpse of just by even just immersing myself in more of that type of content. Even before I was doing solely just founder-led content, was just the ideas, kind of the high-level focuses that you have to really take yourself out of, because as a writer, you're really kind of narrowing in and making sure like all the words are lined up nicely and the sentences are where they need to be. But now the rules are kind of out the window depending on how the founder is going to be talking. Lean on the writing skills that you have, but note that it's a whole different type of approach when you haven't done it before. So something that even what I've done in the past was copy working, where you kind of mimic the kind of style and write out, which I've been doing since high school. And so what's funny is that before I started my job at Compound, the CEO there was like, oh yeah, I do copy working, or I study different types of writers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that too. So it's one of those things where it's okay to kind of go back to those like fundamental and foundational skills that AI can't just hand to you.
Right. So pivoting, maybe not away from founder-led content, but just thinking about content in general. You live and eat and breathe content. Obviously our show is Content Matters. We have a lot of folks who touch content on the show, but sitting in a content lead, a content writer role, you're seeing kind of everything in a really tactical execution way. What is your take on the perception of content in the market? Do people still value it? Is writing still a skill set that people, we all know it's needed, but do you think people still think that it's valuable enough? Are there different skills we should be leaning into? I'm just curious your take.
Content has changed in the last couple of years. Even looking at SEO and how that's been kind of going on different rails. I think the value of content has gone up, but to the point where it's almost a need for overproduction. And the problem with overproduction is that you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm talking kind of in just across all platforms, right? And that's my concern, because people have found a way to, of course, automate the content, which can be a good or bad thing depending on what you're doing with it. It has become more saturated, but there's still a lot of value because people want to find the human in all the noise. And so the ones who are succeeding are the ones who are allowing more human eyes on what's going out there. And they're seeing that content is a way to generate those views and those things to kind of show up more, and then go from there. I think when it comes to skill set, that, I guess of course, my opinion, I'm like, skills first, people. Not
Right.
But I guess as a whole, I'm wondering if it's become less looked at until they realize it's starting to sound the same. And then when people get to that point of wait a second, no, this is not how it should read, then they're like, we need someone with skills. And that's something that I'm still trying to struggle with, because, and kind of going back to the whole teaching thing, I wonder if, again, what's that crutch that people are looking, especially with, AI and LLMs, what is it that they're taking away from the practice, the training, the knowledge that we essentially had to do throughout our schooling? I worry about the approach, honestly. I do worry about it, but I think the ones that are seeing the value more and more, because I think everyone sees content as a needed thing, but the value of how much to kind of place in human input, I think there are different camps on the involvement. And I know that a lot of teams are wanting to be leaner because of the processes are expanded, 10 times, 100 times.
Well, teams and leaders, I think.
Yeah.
There are people who just see the opportunity and want to find efficiencies, and we should be doing that. But I also think a lot of it has been forced.
Yeah. And it's tough when you think good content, the actual execution is very much involved, even with those efficient processes, because I can look at a draft of a post, have Claude up and have ChatGPT on another end, and then Googling a different tab, and I'm still going to take an hour or so.
Right.
Because I'm looking at it not from the machine's eyes, I'm looking at it from how is this coming across from a human standpoint.
Right.
The machine is just going to mimic what reads well from a human standpoint.
Well, and there's, multiple tools that they're good at different things. I was just talking to someone this morning, and they're like, okay, so I went into Perplexity and did research, and then I went into ChatGPT and created the article, and then I went to Claude and said, okay, but now make the article sound like the brand profile. And there's so many different work streams to think through and how you create it too. Yeah. If you were to give advice to a writer, someone who's in a seat that needs to produce content, what would you say to them?
I would say know the fundamentals first, train on that, even if you have to go back to pen and paper and understand the fundamentals of sentence structure, story structure, frameworks of the different types of phrasing you can use, but also, because if you know the rules, you can not break them, but you can work with them, right? And I know that in a lot of LinkedIn content, you can go off of tangents and you can have those incomplete sentences and it's still fine. And so studying writing by writing, not with any tools, even if it's just for yourself, just to kind of get that practice in, just to do that. So when I write for myself or when I put content out on LinkedIn and even on Substack, I will actually not open any of the AI tools because I want to keep that muscle working. And I know my brand, maybe, but personal branding and whatnot, I think it's just being yourself as best as you can for as much as you want to put out there. And so maybe a sentence could have been streamlined more. Maybe I could have used a different word, but at the time, that's what I wanted to do. So I just kind of press post and go from there. And by doing that, I've noticed that I'm able to keep those skills up, at least for me, and kind of work with that type of writing. And then when I go and work my job and use the tools to help me keep everything aligned and organized and outlined, I'm falling back on the skills that tells me, wait, that sentence seems off, but Claude is saying, oh, this reads well. And I'm like, Claude, that's not what I was going for. Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. So I think being willing to take a step back from immediately using tools and creating content, even if it's just for yourself, even if you don't post it, if you want to do writing or any type of content marketing, go back to those things that made you want to do content and writing and that kind of social marketing in the first place.
Yeah, I love two, I think, really important things to call out is one, keeping the muscle, because you need experts to be able to vet and verify and use the tools. And if you lose that muscle, you no longer become the person who can do that. And then I think that framework is something we don't talk about as much. I heard it a lot more when ChatGPT first came out, or when it first was getting popular, but
when it was doing its thing.
Yeah. But I think we've lost that in some of the prompting. Like if you, like you said, story structure, and you know the different arcs, and you know good syntax and all of that stuff, you can also prompt better, or like you know how to go in and I think adjust to say this is a great first draft, but can you go in and like apply this framework to it so that it reads better? And for just your standard person who maybe doesn't know those things, you're not going to have those tools at your disposal to even use the tools more effectively. So I think both of those are important call outs. Like you have to maintain your mastery so that you can be the person qualifying the output, and knowing those foundations, I think, can make you better at using the tools. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.